The sirens cut through the quiet lake air like a blade. Red and blue lights bounced off the water, flashing against the side of my newly built dock. I was standing there, barefoot, holding a cup of coffee, when the sheriff's car rolled down the gravel path. And right beside it, arms crossed, lips pursed, eyes blazing, was Karen. "Officer!" she yelled, before the car had even stopped. "That man is trespassing and illegally building on HOA property. Arrest him before he finishes ruining our lakefront." I didn't move. I just stared at her, my heartbeat steady, though inside I could feel the anger clawing. The dock wasn't some random project. I had spent months planning it, making sure it was safe, sturdy, and in harmony with the lake. Yet here she was, screaming for my arrest. The sheriff climbed out slowly, tipping his hat. "Afternoon," he said, cautious. His eyes shifted between Karen and me, then back to the dock. Karen jabbed her finger in my direction like a weapon. "He thinks he can just build wherever he wants, like he owns the whole place. He doesn't. This is HOA-controlled land." The sheriff turned to me. "Sir, do you mind telling me what's going on here?" I took a long sip of my coffee. My voice came out calm, though I felt the tension tightening in my chest. "Sheriff, I'm not trespassing, and I didn't build this dock on HOA land." Karen let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, please. Everyone knows the association controls this shoreline. He's lying. That dock has to come down or he has to be fined." The sheriff raised an eyebrow at me. "So, do you own this property? Do you have the rights to this part of the lake?" And that was the moment. The moment Karen didn't see coming. The moment the entire story would hinge on, because the truth was, what she thought she controlled, I owned. Not just the dock, not just the cabin, but the entire shoreline. I looked her dead in the eye, then back at the sheriff. My lips parted to speak, to reveal what Karen had never once considered. But before I could get a word out, Karen stomped her foot so hard it echoed on the dock. "Don't listen to him. He's bluffing. Just arrest him already." The sheriff's hand hovered near his belt, his expression unreadable. The air felt heavier, the lake perfectly still, as though waiting for my answer. I knew that once I spoke, nothing would ever be the same again, and that's where I'll leave you, for now. But how did we get here? It started months earlier when I first bought the lake cabin. It wasn't fancy, just a small wooden place tucked between tall pines, the kind of home that smelled of cedar and fresh rain. For me, it was perfect. I had worked in construction all my life, saving enough for this slice of peace. The lake had always been my dream. As a kid, I'd sit with my granddad on his porch by another lake, listening to him talk about how water healed the soul. He used to say, "A lake doesn't ask who you are. It just reflects what you bring to it." Those words stayed with me. So when I bought this cabin, I thought it was a chance to honor him, and maybe find a little of that peace again. I wanted to fix it up, maybe build a small dock where I could fish or let my nieces dangle their feet in the water during summer. But that's when Karen showed up. She lived 3 cabins down, though calling it living was generous. Karen didn't relax by the lake. She patrolled it. Every day she was out walking her little white dog, clipboard in hand, making notes about who was doing what. If someone left their kayak tied up too long, Karen wrote it down. If someone forgot to cut their grass, Karen filed a complaint. When she saw me hammering the first beams for my dock, she came storming down in her sun hat and floral blouse like she was queen of the lake. "You can't build here," she said, not even introducing herself. "This shoreline belongs to the HOA. We have rules, and I enforce them." I smiled politely. "Ma'am, I checked before I started. I'm not breaking any rules." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." Then she marched back up the hill, her dog yipping behind her. At first I thought it was just noise. People like Karen usually bark more than they bite. But soon she was back every other day, threatening me, saying she would call the board, the county, the sheriff. I tried kindness. I offered her coffee once when she came by. I explained that the dock was safe, that I'd worked construction for years. She sneered. "Kindness doesn't excuse breaking the rules. I will shut this down." And she meant it. Still, I kept building. Each nail I hammered in felt like a promise to myself and to my granddad that I wasn't going to let someone like Karen steal my peace. But Karen wasn't letting up either. She escalated. First she sent letters. Then she gathered neighbors to complain. Finally, she did the unthinkable. She called the cops. Which brings us back to that day. To me, standing on my dock, Karen shouting, the sheriff waiting for my answer. Would I back down? Would I fold under her threats? Or would I finally let everyone know the truth about who really controlled this lake? Now, I'll ask you, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments because I want to know how far this story is traveling. And trust me, this is only the beginning. The sheriff's eyes stayed locked on mine, steady and sharp, while Karen's shrill voice carried over the water. Why are you even hesitating? She barked, pointing at me as though her finger alone could convict me. This dock is a violation. He doesn't belong here, and if you let him keep building, every neighbor will think they can do whatever they want. Her little dog yipped and circled her feet, as if even it was embarrassed by the noise. Sheriff Miller shifted his weight, hand resting lightly on his belt, his tone slow and measured. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. I haven't heard his side yet. Karen gasped, her mouth falling open like she'd been slapped. His side? What side could there possibly be? Look at it. She flung her arms toward the dock. Illegal, unauthorized, HOA rules. That's enough. Miller's voice cut through hers, calm but firm. For the first time, she shut her mouth, though her glare could have lit the dock on fire if anger were gasoline. The sheriff turned back to me. All right, Daniel, let's hear it. Do you own this dock? Do you have the rights to build here? Because right now, I've got one person yelling about HOA violations and one person just standing here with a cup of coffee. I took a breath, feeling the weight of every eye on me. A couple of neighbors had gathered on their porches, pretending not to watch but clearly interested. I lowered my coffee cup slowly. Sheriff, I'm not breaking the law. I've got the paperwork to prove it. This dock is on my land. Karen's laugh cracked across the lake like thunder. Your land? Oh, that's rich. You don't own this shoreline. Nobody does. The HOA does. Everyone knows that. But I didn't respond to her. Not yet. I kept my eyes on Miller, calm but unshaken. I can show you the deed. But you should know something before we go down that road. It's not just this dock. It's not just my little slice of beach. Karen's head snapped toward me. What nonsense are you spewing now? I tilted my chin toward her. Karen, maybe you should stop shouting long enough to listen. Because once the sheriff looks at those papers, you're going to realize just how wrong you are. The sheriff gave me a long, unreadable look. Papers, huh? I nodded once. They're in the cabin. Karen groaned dramatically, stamping her foot on the gravel path. This is ridiculous. He's stalling, trying to bluff his way out of a fine. Don't you see what he's doing? Sheriff, you need to shut this down now before... And that was when the first thunderclap rolled over the lake. Not from the sky, but from the sound of wood cracking. Everyone's head jerked toward the dock at once. One of the beams, solid oak I had anchored deep, splintered with a deafening crack as the water slapped harder than usual against the posts. The whole left side of the dock groaned, tilting slightly as though the lake itself was testing it. Karen screamed, stumbling back. It's collapsing. I told you it wasn't safe. Arrest him before someone gets killed. The sheriff's hand went to his radio, eyes narrowing. Neighbors rushed closer, murmuring in alarm. And me? I just stood there, heart pounding, watching my brand new dock strain against the water. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen at all. But let me rewind for a moment. Because before that dock groaned, and before Karen called the cops, things were quieter. I'd been at the cabin nearly 2 months when I first laid out the plans for the dock. I sketched everything by hand. Measurements, material lists, the angles of sunlight so the boards wouldn't warp too soon. Building was in my blood. My father and grandfather had both worked with their hands, men who believed in fixing things yourself instead of waiting for someone else to do it. The cabin wasn't perfect when I bought it. The roof needed patches, the plumbing was moody, and the paint on the shutters peeled with every breeze. But to me, it was heaven. I spent my mornings with coffee on the porch, listening to loons echo across the water. My evenings were filled with hammers and sawdust, sweat dripping into my shirt as I made the place my own. For the first few weeks, Karen only watched. She'd stroll past, dog tugging at the leash, her eyes sharp as knives. Sometimes she'd stop and pretend to stretch, really just to spy on what I was doing. Other times she'd talk to other neighbors just loud enough for me to hear. Can you believe what he's building? It won't last a season. I ignored her. I'd met plenty of people like Karen before, loud, controlling, convinced the world revolved around them. My granddad always told me, you can't fight fire with fire, Daniel. Sometimes you let it burn itself out. But Karen wasn't burning out. She was building steam. The first letter arrived one Tuesday morning tucked under my cabin door. Notice of violation. It read in bold at the top. Below that, she had scribbled rules, section numbers, even fake fines. The signature at the bottom was just Karen, HOA committee. I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how much energy she spent on trying to control me. I put the letter in a drawer. A week later, another one came, then another, each nastier than the last. Still, I kept building, because every nail I drove into the dock reminded me of the summers with my granddad, fishing with worms and laughing at the way he'd tell the same stories again and again. The dock wasn't just wood. It was memory. It was peace. But Karen didn't see it that way. To her, it was a battle. and battles in her mind were meant to be won. Back in the present, the dock let out another groan, the water splashing hard against it as the sheriff stepped closer. "Daniel," he said slowly, "you better tell me right now, was this thing built safe?" Karen seized the moment, her voice shrill with triumph. "See? Even the sheriff knows it's dangerous. Tear it down before it kills someone." I clenched my jaw, because I knew the dock was solid. I had measured, reinforced, double-checked every joint. The lake wasn't calm today, that was true. But collapse? No way. At least I thought not. Until the right side of the dock gave a sharp lurch, water splashing up high onto the beams. Neighbors gasped. The sheriff's hand tightened on his belt. Karen smiled like she had just won the lottery. And me? I froze, every nerve in my body waiting to see if the dock I had poured my soul into would stand, or crumble in front of everyone. The wood screamed again. The whole dock shuddered. And then, the dock shuddered again, the groan of the beams echoing like thunder across the water. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, splashing into the gravel at my feet. Karen let out a triumphant laugh that carried like nails down a chalkboard. "I told you," she shouted, pointing with a shaking hand. "Unsafe, dangerous. I want it condemned right now." The neighbors murmured louder now, edging closer to the shoreline. Some looked worried, others simply entertained. In a quiet town like ours, drama was rare, and Karen's theatrics were often their main source of entertainment. Sheriff Miller took a cautious step forward, boots crunching in the gravel. His hand hovered near his radio again. "Daniel, I need the truth. Did you rush this? Is this thing safe?" The air hung thick with expectation. I could almost feel the weight of my granddad's memory pressing on me, his words about the lake, about building things that lasted. My heart pounded, but my voice came out calm. "It's safe," I said firmly. "I built it with my own 2 hands, same way I've built homes and porches for years. I didn't cut corners." The dock groaned once more, tilting ever so slightly before holding steady. I exhaled slowly. Karen scoffed, throwing her arms in the air. "Oh please, you call that safe? That dock is a death trap and you're a liar. Sheriff, you need to shut him down right now." Sheriff Miller held up a hand. "Ma'am, I'm handling this, step back." But Karen didn't step back. She took a defiant step closer instead, her little dog barking at my feet as though it too wanted me gone. "I won't stand by while this intruder endangers the entire community. He's breaking every HOA rule in the book and you know it." Her voice cracked, shrill and desperate, like she was clinging to authority that was slipping away. That was when the sheriff turned to me, his expression softening just slightly. "Daniel, you said you've got paperwork." I nodded. "Yes, sir. In the cabin. Deed, survey maps, all of it." Karen barked out a bitter laugh. "Oh, don't believe that nonsense. He'll probably print something off the internet and try to pass it as real." The sheriff shot her a look. "Karen, enough. If he says he has documents, I'll take a look." I could see the blood drain from her face, though she quickly masked it with more rage. "This is absurd. You're wasting time when that dock is seconds away from collapsing." But even as she said it, the dock steadied, the beams creaking but holding strong. It wasn't collapsing. It was settling, the way new wood sometimes does against water pressure. I took a step closer, lifting my chin. "Sheriff, come with me. I'll show you." Karen shrieked. "No, you can't let him trick you." She turned to the neighbors. "Do you see what's happening? He's manipulating the law to steal what belongs to all of us." Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Others frowned. A few even whispered among themselves, clearly tired of her endless tirades. The sheriff ignored her and gestured to me. "All right, lead the way." Karen tried to follow, but Miller stopped her with one hand raised. "You stay here. You'll get your say after I see the documents." For once, Karen was speechless. She stood there, seething, dog squirming in her arms as she glared daggers at me. As I walked toward the cabin with the sheriff beside me, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Every step echoed louder in my chest. I knew what those papers meant, I knew what they revealed, but I also knew something else. Karen wasn't going to back down no matter what. 2 months earlier, when I had first closed on the cabin, I remember sitting with the realtor as she explained the details. The cabin itself wasn't unusual. 2 bedrooms, a fireplace, a wraparound porch, but the land attached to it was unique. "Most lake properties around here have shared shoreline," the realtor had said, tapping the papers. "But this one, it's different. The original deed from over 50 years ago included the entire stretch of shoreline surrounding this cabin. Technically, it's yours. No HOA jurisdiction." I remember blinking in disbelief. "The entire shoreline, not just this piece?" She nodded. "That's right. It's rare, but it's clean. Clear clear title, no disputes. If you want it, it's yours. I hadn't bought the cabin for power or control. I bought it for peace, for the dream of fishing off my own dock, for mornings of quiet coffee and evenings watching the sunset. Owning the shoreline was just a bonus. But I knew, deep down, that someday it would come up. And that day had come. Back in the present, I led the sheriff into the cabin. The air smelled faintly of pine and fresh varnish, the result of my recent work. I walked to the small desk in the corner, opened the drawer, and pulled out the thick manila envelope. "Here," I said, handing it to him. Miller opened it carefully, scanning the documents inside. His eyes moved over the maps, the highlighted boundaries, the signatures. He flipped to the deed itself, tracing the legal descriptions with a practiced finger. "This is legitimate," he murmured. I stayed quiet, letting the truth speak for itself. After a moment, he looked up at me, his face unreadable. "You know what this means, right?" I nodded. "I do." He exhaled slowly. "All right." He tucked the papers back into the envelope and handed it to me. "Let's go back outside." As we stepped out onto the porch, Karen's voice carried up the hill. She was still yelling at the neighbors, trying to rally them. "He's lying. He's destroying our lake. If we don't stop him now, he'll build a mansion and a marina and ruin everything." The neighbors looked uncomfortable, some folding their arms, others shaking their heads. When Karen saw the sheriff and me returning, she straightened her back and lifted her chin high. "Well, did you find anything? Or did he give you some fake piece of paper?" Sheriff Miller's voice was calm, even. "Karen, I saw the documents." Her eyes widened. "And?" The sheriff paused. The entire group of neighbors leaned in. Karen's dog yipped, the only sound breaking the silence. Miller's next words would decide everything. And just before he could speak, the dock groaned again. But this time, it wasn't just a groan. With a sharp crack, one of the corner posts gave way, sending a spray of water into the air. The dock tilted hard to the left, one board popping loose and floating into the lake. The neighbors gasped. Karen shrieked. The sheriff's eyes snapped to mine. And me? My heart sank like a stone. Because even though I knew the dock was built right, the lake had its own mind, and it had just chosen the worst moment possible to test me. That night, after the sheriff left and the neighbors retreated, I sat alone on the porch staring at the half-collapsed dock. The air was cool, crickets singing in the trees, the lake rippling under the moonlight. I thought about my granddad again, about his words. "The lake reflects what you bring to it." Had I brought pride, stubbornness? Was that why the dock had given way at that moment? But no. Deep down, I knew it wasn't failure. It was just bad timing, the kind of storm every builder faces. The problem wasn't the dock. The problem was Karen. Because tomorrow she would take this as proof she was right. She'd march through the neighborhood, crowing about how she saved the lake and push harder than ever to tear down what I built. And that's exactly what happened. The next morning, I woke to find another letter shoved under my door. "Final warning," it read, underlined in thick marker. I opened it and laughed bitterly. Karen had no idea what was coming, because while she thought she was winning, the truth sat quietly in my drawer. The deed, the shoreline, the power she didn't know I had, and when the time came to reveal it, she wouldn't just freeze, she'd crumble. But until then, I had to play the game carefully. The dock wasn't gone. It wasn't beyond repair. I spent the next few days reinforcing it, replacing the broken post, tightening every bolt until the wood felt like an extension of the land itself. Sweat soaked through my shirt, but every strike of the hammer felt like reclaiming something Karen had tried to take away. Neighbors passed by, some nodding in quiet support, others avoiding my eyes. I could tell some were beginning to question Karen's authority. But Karen herself? She doubled down. She showed up one afternoon with a clipboard in hand, snapping pictures of the dock as I worked. "You can build all you want," she sneered, "but you'll never win. The HOA is bigger than you." I didn't respond. I just kept hammering, each nail a promise. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the water glowed orange, I finally sat on the edge of the repaired dock, feet dangling over the lake. For the first time since it all began, I smiled. Because I knew something Karen didn't. The sheriff knew it now too, and soon the entire neighborhood would know. Karen didn't waste a second after the dock's near collapse. By sunrise the very next day, she was marching door to door with that infamous clipboard of hers, gathering signatures and spreading her gospel of HOA law like it was the Bible itself. I stood on my porch sipping coffee, watching her from a distance. She was animated, waving her arms, her little dog yapping with every step she took. Neighbors leaned out from their porches, some polite, some annoyed, others just plain weary. The lake was calm, the sky still streaked with pink from dawn, but Karen's voice carried like a foghorn. "This man thinks he can own the shoreline," she shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "He thinks he can just plant a dock wherever he pleases, endangering our community, destroying our rules. If we don't unite now, we'll lose control forever." Her words twisted the truth like barbed wire. I felt my jaw tighten, my fingers curling around the coffee mug. I wasn't against the community. I wasn't trying to steal control. All I wanted was peace, a place to breathe. But Karen thrived on chaos, and now she was building an army. Around noon, I decided I couldn't just sit by and watch anymore. I walked down the path toward the dock, my tool belt slung over my shoulder. Neighbors paused as I passed, whispering among themselves. Some gave me nods of quiet support. Others turned away, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. Karen, of course, spotted me immediately. She stormed down the hill, hair frazzled from the humid air, clipboard clutched like a shield. "Daniel," she barked, "do you think this is a game? I already have 12 signatures. 12! That's a majority vote for removal." I raised an eyebrow. "Removal of what?" "Your dock. Your so-called project. The HOA board will vote tonight, and you'll be forced to tear it down. That's the end of it." I looked her straight in the eye. "Karen, you're wasting your time?" She sneered. "Oh, we'll see about that." The evening came quickly, and with it, the so-called emergency HOA meeting. Normally, these meetings were held once a quarter inside the small community hall, a modest wooden building with creaky floors and fluorescent lights, but tonight the place was packed. Every seat was filled, neighbors spilling into the aisles and standing against the walls. Karen stood at the front, practically glowing with self-importance. She slammed her clipboard down on the table and cleared her throat dramatically. "Neighbors," she began, her voice sharp and righteous. "We are here tonight because one man believes he is above the rules. He thinks his dock matters more than our community. He thinks he can build wherever he wants, whenever he wants, without oversight. And if we let him get away with it, what's next? Floating bars? Jet skis at all hours? Strangers invading our peace?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. I sat in the back row, arms crossed, silent. I knew this wasn't the time to reveal the truth. Not yet. Not until they pushed me far enough. Karen raised her voice. "We cannot allow this chaos. I propose immediate removal of Daniel's dock and the issuing of a fine for damages to the community shoreline." She turned, expecting thunderous applause. Instead, what came was mixed. Some clapped half-heartedly. A few shouted, "Hear, hear!" But others shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uneasy glances. One man near the front stood up. His name was Tom, a retired teacher with kind eyes. "Karen, with all due respect, Daniel's dock hasn't hurt anyone. He built it himself. Shouldn't we at least hear his side before voting?" Karen's face flushed red. "His side? His side is lies. He's manipulating all of you." But Tom didn't back down. "We're a community. We should act like one." A quiet cheer came from the back. Another neighbor chimed in. "Yeah, I don't see why the dock bothers anyone. Looks sturdy to me." Karen's grip tightened on her clipboard. "You fools don't understand. This isn't about one dock, it's about order." Her voice cracked at the word, shrill and desperate. Sheriff Miller, who had been standing quietly near the door, finally spoke up. "Karen, maybe you should calm down. Folks are asking for fairness. Let Daniel speak." All eyes turned to me. I rose slowly, the wooden chair creaking beneath me. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. "I didn't come here to pick a fight. I didn't come here to stir trouble. I came here to live quietly by the lake, to fish, to work, to find some peace. The dock I built," I paused, glancing at Karen, "wasn't meant to divide anyone. It was meant to honor someone I loved." The room grew quiet. I went on. "My grandfather raised me by another lake. We spent summers on a dock just like the one I built. He used to say, the lake reflects what you bring to it. He taught me patience, kindness, respect. That dock is more than wood. It's memory. It's love." A few neighbors nodded, soft smiles tugging at their lips. Karen rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might fall over. "Don't fall for his sob story," she snapped. "This isn't about his grandpa. It's about rules. He broke them, plain and simple." I tilted my head. "Did I? Which rule says I can't build on my land?" Karen froze, just for a second. Then she recovered. "Everyone knows the shoreline belongs to the HOA." That was it. The opening. The crack in her wall of certainty. I looked around the room, letting silence hang heavy. Is that true? Does it really belong to the HOA? Murmurs spread through the hall. People frowned, exchanged looks, whispered to one another. Karen slammed her hand on the table. Yes, yes, it does. And you will see when the vote passes tonight. But in her desperation, she didn't notice the sheriff's eyes on me. He knew. He had seen the papers. And when the truth came out, Karen wouldn't just be embarrassed, she'd be exposed. That meeting ended in chaos. Karen screamed until her voice cracked. Neighbors argued, and the board postponed the vote until further investigation. I walked home in silence, the night air cool against my skin, stars scattered across the sky. When I reached my porch, I sat down, staring at the dock illuminated by moonlight. It stood firm, stronger than before, repaired and solid. But Karen wasn't done. I knew her type. This wasn't a battle she would let go. And sure enough, the very next morning, I woke to flashing lights once again. 2 squad cars sat at the end of my driveway. Karen was standing there, arms crossed, smiling like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. "Daniel," Sheriff Miller said gravely as he approached, "we need to talk." The red and blue lights flickered against the lake's surface like restless ghosts. I stood barefoot on the porch, arms crossed, trying to keep my heartbeat steady. The cool morning air bit at my skin, but the heat of Karen's smug grin burned hotter than any summer sun. "There he is," she announced loudly to the deputies as though she were the star of a courtroom drama. "The criminal himself. Arrest him before he does more damage to our community property." Her dog barked like an echo of her voice, yapping in frantic agreement. Sheriff Miller gave me a long, tired look as he approached the steps. 2 deputies flanked him, their hands resting casually near their belts. The neighbors had begun gathering at the end of the gravel road, whispering, their faces lit up by the pulsing lights. I exhaled slowly. "Morning, Sheriff." "Daniel," he said, his tone flat but not unkind. "We got another call. Multiple this time." He glanced briefly over his shoulder at Karen, who puffed up like a rooster being praised. "The report says you've expanded your dock and built on community shoreline without authorization." Karen stepped forward before I could speak. "Not just unauthorized, Sheriff. Illegal. He's taken over HOA land. That's theft. I want him charged." My jaw tightened, but I stayed calm. "Sheriff, you've seen the papers." Karen's head snapped toward him. "What papers?" Miller rubbed the back of his neck. "Karen, you need to slow down." "No!" she shrieked, jabbing her finger at me. "Don't you see what's happening? He's trying to trick all of us. He's dangerous." Her voice cracked with desperation. The deputies exchanged a look, clearly unsure how to proceed. I straightened my back. "Sheriff, if you need to see the documents again, I'll get them. But before I do, let me say this. I didn't move here to fight. I didn't build that dock to break laws. I came here for peace, for memories, and I've been treated like a criminal for it." The neighbors murmured louder. Some nodded, others frowned. Karen exploded. "Peace? Memories? He's building a private marina to line his pockets. He wants to take everything from us." That was when one of the deputies, a younger guy with sandy hair, frowned. "Ma'am, with all due respect, it's just one dock." Karen gasped like he had cursed at her. "Just one dock? Just one dock? That's how it starts. First a dock, then boats, then chaos." The sheriff raised his hand. "Enough. Daniel, get your papers. Let's put this to rest." Karen screamed, "No, don't let him. He'll forge something, I know it." But the sheriff's gaze stayed steady on me, not her. "Papers, Daniel. Please." Inside my cabin, I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the manila envelope again. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to reveal. For weeks, Karen had ruled with intimidation and half-truths. For weeks, she'd controlled the neighborhood with fear. But now the truth would finally begin to shine. I handed the envelope to Miller outside. He opened it slowly, examining the deed and survey maps under the flashing lights. The deputies leaned in. Neighbors craned their necks. Karen's face twitched with panic. "Well?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The sheriff's eyes lifted from the papers, locking onto hers. "These documents are legitimate. The shoreline is not under HOA jurisdiction." The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. Karen's jaw dropped, her face draining of color. No, that's impossible. Everyone knows the HOA controls the lake." "Not this part," Miller corrected. "This deed is older than the HOA. It gives Daniel rights to the entire stretch of shoreline around his cabin." Karen's clipboard slipped from her hands, clattering to the gravel. For the first time, she had no words. The deputies stepped back, crossing their arms. Neighbors exchanged wide-eyed looks. Some smiled. A few even chuckled. Karen's voice finally returned, trembling with rage. This can't be real. You're lying. You're all lying." But her words carried no power anymore. The sheriff tucked the papers back into the envelope and handed them to me. Daniel, you're within your rights. As far as I'm concerned, this matter is closed. Karen staggered back like she'd been struck. Her dog squirmed in her arms, whining as though embarrassed by her. I turned toward her, my voice low but steady. Karen, I told you I wasn't breaking the law. I told you I wanted peace. But you couldn't leave it alone. You tried to humiliate me, call the cops on me, turn the neighbors against me. She shook her head violently. No, this isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll call the county. The sheriff cut her off. Karen, unless you want me to file a report for harassment, I suggest you go home. The words landed like a hammer. Karen froze. Her lips quivered. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Finally, with a strangled cry, she turned on her heel and stormed up the road, her dog yapping in her arms. The neighbors burst into quiet chatter, some shaking their heads, others clapping me on the back. Good for you, Daniel, one said. About time someone stood up to her. But even as I accepted their kind words, I knew the battle wasn't truly over. Karen wasn't the type to give up. She'd lick her wounds, plot, and strike again. And sure enough, I was right. 3 nights later, long after the neighborhood had gone quiet, I woke to a strange sound outside my cabin. A low thud, then another. I slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and crept to the window. The moonlit lake shimmered, calm and beautiful. But my dock was on fire. Flames licked up the posts, boards crackling in the night. The reflection of fire danced across the water like some twisted celebration. I stumbled back from the window, shock ripping through me. Who would? But I already knew. The crackle of fire tore through the stillness of the night. Orange flames clawed their way up the wooden posts of my dock, hissing as they licked the lake's edge. Sparks leapt into the air, carried by the breeze, threatening to spread further. My chest tightened, my breath catching in my throat. For a moment I froze, paralyzed between disbelief and fear. That dock wasn't just wood and nails. It was my grandfather's memory, my peace, my work. Watching it burn felt like watching him vanish all over again. Then instinct kicked in. I grabbed the old fire extinguisher from the kitchen wall and bolted outside. Gravel bit into my bare feet, but I didn't stop. The night air was sharp and heavy with smoke. Neighbors still tucked asleep in their cabins. The only sound was the cruel cackle of the fire. I yanked the pin from the extinguisher and blasted the flames. White foam sprayed wildly, coating the boards and posts. The hiss of water and chemical battled against the crackling heat. My arms ached, my lungs screamed, but I refused to let it win. By the time the flames shrank to smoldering embers, my dock was charred black, half the boards warped and broken. The once strong posts sagged, wounded, but not gone. My hands trembled as I dropped the empty extinguisher. My heart still hammering, I stood there in the smoke, shaking, the reflection of ruin shimmering across the lake. Someone had set this fire, and I already knew who. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire itself. Neighbors gathered in small knots along the road, whispering and pointing. Some came by to check on me, offering coffee, breakfast, even spare lumber. Their sympathy felt kind, but underneath, I could see the same question burning in their eyes. Was it Karen? Sheriff Miller showed up just after sunrise, his face lined with exhaustion. He crouched near the dock, studying the scorched wood with a grim look. This wasn't an accident, he muttered. I swallowed hard. No, it wasn't. Karen appeared a short time later, dressed in her usual pressed blouse and wide sun hat, dog prancing beside her. She gasped dramatically when she saw the dock. Oh my goodness. What happened here? She asked, her voice high with feigned innocence. I turned slowly, my jaw tight. You know exactly what happened. Her eyes widened in mock offense. How dare you accuse me? Do you think I'd stoop so low? Sheriff Miller rose to his feet, dusting off his hands, his eyes cut toward Karen. Funny thing, ma'am. Daniel didn't mention any names. Karen's face twitched. Well, I was just making sure he wasn't pointing fingers because that's slander, and I won't tolerate it. Her words rang hollow. The neighbors standing nearby exchanged uneasy glances. The sheriff crossed his arms. Karen, do you know anything about this fire? She clutched her dog tighter. Of course not. I was home all night. Ask anyone. But her voice quivered, her cheeks flushing red. Miller sighed. We'll investigate. Until then, I suggest everyone stay calm. He looked at me. Daniel, we'll get to the bottom of this. I nodded, though my chest burned with anger. Karen might have fooled some, but not me. This wasn't random. This was her retaliation. That evening, I sat on my porch staring at the wreckage of the dock. The lake was calm, the air still, but inside me, a storm raged. I thought about my granddad again, how he used to tell me stories about men who lost everything yet still stood tall. The lake, he'd say, doesn't bow to fire, or storm, or men. It endures, and so must you. Those words echoed in me now. I wasn't going to let Karen break me, so I made a decision. If she wanted war, I'd fight. Not with fire, not with lies, but with truth. I would rebuild stronger, louder, and more defiant than before. And when the time came, I would reveal the one fact that Karen could never undo. The shoreline wasn't hers. It was mine. The very next day, I began gathering supplies. I hauled in new beams, thicker and sturdier than the last. I brought down barrels of nails, power tools, even steel brackets to reinforce the foundation. If Karen thought she could scare me, she had miscalculated. Neighbors began to notice. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others gave me quiet encouragement. A few even offered to help, though I politely declined. This wasn't just about rebuilding wood. It was about making a statement. Karen, of course, lost her mind. She stormed down to the shoreline, hair frizzing in the summer heat, her clipboard clutched like a sword. "You can't rebuild," she screeched. "The board hasn't voted yet. You're under investigation. This is illegal." I wiped the sweat from my brow and looked her dead in the eye. Illegal? Or just inconvenient for you? Her face turned crimson. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you've beaten me, but the HOA doesn't lose." I slammed the hammer down on the beam with a sharp crack. Neither do I. Days passed, and the new dock began to rise from the ashes. Stronger, broader, reinforced with steel. It wasn't just a dock anymore. It was a symbol. But with every nail I drove in, Karen's rage grew louder. She filed complaints, sent letters, and cornered neighbors in their driveways, demanding they take her side. And then, she escalated again. One night, just as I was locking up the cabin, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Headlights washed over the porch and I stepped back into the shadows. A sleek black SUV idled at the edge of the gravel. The driver's door opened and a tall man in a suit stepped out. He wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't from around here. Karen climbed out from the passenger side, her dog under one arm, her smile sharper than glass. "Daniel," she called, her voice dripping with triumph. "This is Mr. Whitmore, our HOA attorney. You've officially been served." The man approached, handing me a thick envelope. "Sir, you are hereby notified of a pending lawsuit filed by the Lakewood Shores Homeowners Association, alleging unlawful construction and damage to communal property." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. A lawsuit. She was dragging me to court. Karen smirked. "Did you really think you could win against me? Against the HOA? This is the end, Daniel." I clenched the envelope in my fist, my eyes never leaving hers. "Karen, you've made a mistake." Her smirk widened. "We'll see." And with that, she climbed back into the SUV, leaving the smell of gasoline and arrogance behind. That night I sat at my desk, the envelope spread open before me. Pages and pages of legal threats, jargon, demands. Karen wasn't playing games anymore. She was trying to crush me. But as I read, I couldn't help but smile. Because she still didn't know the one thing that would undo everything she'd built. I owned the shoreline, and soon the courtroom would know it too. The summons sat on my desk like a viper ready to strike. The thick stack of papers Karen's attorney had delivered glared up at me, full of accusations and legal jargon designed to bury me under weight I couldn't carry. Unlawful construction, damage to communal property, violation of HOA bylaws. I stared at those words long into the night. A part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Another part of me, tired and worn from weeks of fighting, just wanted to walk away. But then I thought about my grandfather. I thought about those summer nights fishing off a dock that he built with his bare hands. I thought about how his voice would carry across the water. The lake doesn't bow to men, Daniel. It reflects who they are. Build right, and it will stand. Build wrong, and it will drown you. Karen wanted me to drown, but I wasn't going under. The next morning, I made a call. My friend Mike, an old buddy from my construction days, had gone on to become an attorney. A good one. When he answered the phone, his voice was groggy. "Daniel, been a while." I told him everything. The dock, Karen, the HOA, the lawsuit. There was silence on the line before he spoke again. "Bring me the deed. Bring me the survey. I'll look it over." But from the sound of it, she just kicked the wrong hornet's nest. Relief washed through me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. 2 weeks later, we walked into the county courthouse. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Karen was already there, perched on the plaintiff's side of the room like a queen awaiting her coronation. Her attorney, Whitmore, stood beside her in a sharp gray suit, his expression smug. When she saw me, she smirked. "Daniel," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with false pity. "I hope you brought your checkbook. This won't take long." I didn't answer. Mike clapped me on the back. "Let her talk. It'll only dig her hole deeper." We took our seats as the judge entered, an older man with silver hair and a no-nonsense expression. The courtroom quieted. "Lakewood Shores HOA versus Daniel Carter," the clerk announced. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Whitmore stood first. He spoke with practiced arrogance, his voice smooth as oil. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Karen Douglas, represents the Lakewood Shores Homeowners Association. The defendant, Mr. Carter, has built an unauthorized dock on community-controlled shoreline, endangering residents and ignoring the rules that bind us all together." Karen beamed as though every word were gospel. Whitmore continued, "We ask that the dock be removed immediately, and that Mr. Carter be fined for damages to communal property, as well as for legal costs incurred by the association." The judge turned to Mike. "Defense?" Mike rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's case rests on a false assumption that the shoreline is under HOA jurisdiction, but the deed in my client's possession tells a different story, a story older than the HOA itself." He walked to the bench and handed over the papers. "This deed, recorded 54 years ago, grants my client ownership of not just his cabin lot, but the entire stretch of shoreline surrounding it. The HOA has no claim here, none." Karen's face drained of color. "That's a lie. That can't be true." The judge raised a hand. "Ma'am, you will remain silent until called upon." Karen's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes burned holes through me. The judge studied the deed, his brows furrowing as he traced the descriptions. Then he looked up. "This appears valid. Is there any evidence from the plaintiff contradicting this?" Whitmore stammered. We were not aware of this deed, Your Honor. But surely the HOA's bylaws do not override property ownership." The judge cut in sharply. "You should know that, counselor." A ripple of laughter ran through the courtroom. Karen's face turned crimson. Whitmore tried to recover. "But, Your Honor, the dock itself has proven unsafe. It collapsed once." Mike stepped forward. "Correction. One beam shifted under unusual water pressure, which my client repaired. Since then, it has stood solid. The sheriff himself inspected it." Miller, sitting in the back row, gave a slow nod. All eyes turned to him, his presence like an anchor of truth. The judge leaned back in his chair. "I see little merit in the plaintiff's case. In fact, I see harassment." Karen shot to her feet, her voice screeching through the courtroom. "Harassment? He's the one harassing us. He's ruining our lake. He's—" "Mrs. Douglas," the judge thundered. "Sit down, or I will hold you in contempt." The room went silent. Karen sat, trembling with rage, her dog whimpering at her feet. The judge sighed. "Unless you have further evidence, this case is dismissed. Mr. Carter is within his rights to build and maintain his dock." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Case closed. The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Some neighbors shook their heads, others smiled. A few clapped quietly. Karen sat frozen, her hands gripping the table so tight her knuckles turned white. Her victory had slipped through her fingers, her power shattered. I stood slowly, turning to face her. My voice was calm, steady. "I told you, Karen. I wasn't breaking the law." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with venom. "This isn't over," she hissed. But I knew it was, at least in that courtroom. That evening, I sat on the edge of my rebuilt dock, the lake calm, the stars mirrored in its surface. For the first time since this war began, I felt peace. Not complete, not yet. Karen wasn't done. People like her never were. But she had been wounded, and now the neighbors had seen her for what she really was. But just as I began to relax, I heard it. A noise, from the woods behind my cabin. A sharp crack of a branch underfoot. I froze, turning slowly, my heart pounding. The trees loomed dark and silent. And then, another sound. A whisper. My name. Daniel. The hair on my neck stood on end. The whisper curled through the trees like smoke. Daniel. I froze on the dock. My breath caught in my chest. The night air was cool, the lake still. But the sound was unmistakable. Someone was out there. I rose slowly, my bare feet pressing against the wooden boards. My eyes scanned the tree line, shadows shifting in the dim glow of the porch light. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, but another part of me, stubborn, tired of fear, kept me rooted in place. "Who's there?" I called, my voice steady though my heart hammered. Silence, then the crunch of leaves. slow, deliberate. I stepped onto the gravel path, the cool stones biting into my feet, my hands curled into fists. Come out. A figure emerged from the darkness. It wasn't Karen. It was Tom, the retired teacher, the neighbor who had spoken up for me during the HOA meeting. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he held a folded piece of paper. "Tom?" I asked, relief mixing with confusion. "What are you doing out here?" He looked around nervously, as though the trees themselves were listening. Then he shoved the paper into my hands. "She's planning something, Daniel," he whispered. "Karen. She's not done. This was slipped under my door tonight." I unfolded the paper under the porch light. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "If you don't stand with me, you'll drown with him tomorrow night. The lake will swallow him and the HOA will be free." My stomach dropped. My grip tightened on the paper until it crumpled in my fist. "She's threatening me now," Tom whispered. "I didn't sign her petition and she knows it. I'm scared, Daniel." I clenched my jaw. "You did the right thing, Tom. She's desperate. That's when people are the most dangerous." Tom nodded, his eyes wide. "Just be careful. Whatever she's planning, it's not just about that dock anymore." The next day, the neighborhood buzzed like a kicked beehive. Karen's tantrum in court had cracked her image, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. She stormed from cabin to cabin, spreading venom, accusing me of bribing the judge, of forging documents, of manipulating the sheriff. "She'll twist anything," Mike told me over the phone. "That's what people like her do when they're cornered. But threats? That's a line she shouldn't have crossed. Keep that note safe. If anything happens, we'll bury her legally." But I wasn't sure law would be enough. That evening, I sat on the dock again, hammer in hand, reinforcing the last of the boards. The sun dipped low, painting the lake in gold. For a moment, I almost believed peace was possible again. But then I saw her, Karen, standing on the hill, watching me. Her arms were crossed, her sun hat tilted low, her dog silent in her arms. She didn't move. She didn't shout. She just stood there, staring. I stared back, refusing to flinch. The air between us was heavy, charged. Finally, she turned and disappeared into the trees. And that was somehow worse than her screaming. Later that night, long after the neighborhood had gone quiet, I woke to the sound of footsteps on my porch. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door. Slowly, carefully, I crept to the window. A shadow moved across the boards of the porch. The front door rattled. Someone was trying the handle. I gripped the bat tighter, my pulse hammering in my ears. The door rattled again, harder this time. Then silence. I held my breath, straining to hear. And then, the sound of water. Footsteps splashing at the shoreline. I bolted to the back window and peered out. Moonlight shimmered on the lake. And there, standing ankle-deep in the water staring at my dock, was Karen. Her face was pale, her eyes wild, the reflection of the moon casting her in ghostly light. She whispered something I couldn't hear, then bent down and placed something under the dock. My stomach twisted. I pushed the door open, bat in hand, and shouted, "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She snapped her head toward me, eyes wide, before scrambling back into the trees, vanishing into the night. I rushed to the dock, breath ragged, and bent down to see what she had left. It was a bundle wrapped in plastic. I pulled it open with trembling hands, and froze. Inside was a canister of gasoline and a box of matches. The canister of gasoline sat heavy in my hands, the box of matches balanced on top like a cruel joke. The night air was cold, but sweat dripped down my back. My dock, my memory of my grandfather, my peace, had already been set on fire once. Now here was proof that Karen wasn't finished. She wanted it gone. She wanted me gone. I carried the bundle back to the cabin, setting it on the porch table under the glow of the light. My hands trembled as I stared at it. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. This was dangerous. By the time morning came, I'd made my choice. I called Sheriff Miller. He showed up within the hour, pulling his cruiser into the driveway. His jaw clenched when he saw the gasoline. "She left this under the dock?" he asked. I nodded. "I caught her in the act. She ran when I shouted." The sheriff rubbed his temples, clearly tired of this circus. "Daniel, I've been patient. I've let her rant, file complaints, even drag you into court. But this?" He pointed at the gasoline. "This is arson waiting to happen. This is a crime." I swallowed hard. "So what now?" "We'll question her," Miller said firmly. "If she keeps pushing, I'll file charges." But deep down, I knew charges wouldn't stop her. Karen wasn't driven by law. She was driven by obsession. Sure enough, by that afternoon, Karen was back at it. She marched up and down the road, voice sharp and shrill, accusing me of planting the gasoline myself. "He's framing me," she screamed, waving her arms as neighbors peeked out their windows. "Don't you see? He's manipulating all of us. He's dangerous." But her words didn't land the same way anymore. Whispers rippled through the neighborhood, doubt, suspicion, even anger. People were tired of her drama, tired of her lies. Tom stopped by later, his voice low. "Daniel, more people are siding with you now. They're seeing who she really is." I nodded. "That's good. But Tom, she's not stopping. She'll get worse." And I was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin made me sit upright. Every rustle outside made me grip the baseball bat tighter. Around midnight, I finally stepped onto the porch, letting the cool night air wash over me. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm and beautiful. For a moment, I closed my eyes, trying to breathe, trying to remember why I came here in the first place. And then I heard it. Engines. The low, rumbling sound of boats. I opened my eyes. Out on the water, two small motorboats cut across the surface, their lights dark, their engines muted to a dull hum. They were heading straight for my dock. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the flashlight and bolted down the path, shouting into the night, "Hey, get away from there!" The boats didn't stop. Figures moved in the shadows, voices low. One of them carried something long, looked like a crowbar. Panic surged in my chest. They were going after the dock. I flashed the light, the beam cutting through the night. And that's when I saw her. Karen. Standing in the bow of one of the boats, her sun hat gone, her hair wild in the wind, her face twisted with rage. "This ends tonight, Daniel," she screamed, her voice carrying across the water. My breath caught. She wasn't just talking about the dock. She was talking about me. I ran back toward the cabin, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. My voice cracked as I shouted into the receiver. "They're on the water. They're heading for my dock. Send someone now." I sprinted back outside, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The boats were closer now, their wakes crashing against the shoreline. Karen stood tall, arms out like she was leading an army. "Burn it down," she shrieked. "Burn it all!" One of the men raised a torch, the flames flickering dangerously close to the water. "Stop!" I yelled, my voice raw. "You'll destroy the whole lake!" But Karen only laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed off the trees. The torch swung toward the dock. The torch's flames licked high into the night, its reflection streaking across the water like a serpent of fire. Karen stood in the bow of the boat, hair whipping in the wind, her eyes wild with fury. "Burn it down," she screeched. "The lake is ours, not his." The men in the boats rowed closer, their oars splashing violently, the torch raised higher. My dock, the one I had built with sweat, with memory, with my grandfather's lessons, stood waiting, its boards gleaming in the moonlight. My throat went dry. This wasn't an argument anymore. This was destruction. "Stop!" I roared, my voice echoing across the lake. "If you light that, you'll destroy everything. The fire won't stop at my dock, it'll spread." But Karen only laughed, her voice sharp and cruel. "Good. Then maybe you'll finally leave." My hands shook as I clutched the flashlight, the beam dancing wildly across the water. My chest burned with helpless rage. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this way. I dashed back up the path, my legs pumping like pistons, and grabbed the fire extinguisher I had refilled after the first blaze. My lungs screamed, but I sprinted back to the shoreline just as the torch dipped lower. The boats had reached the dock now, the torch so close I could hear the crackle of its flames. One of the men leaned forward, ready to press it against the boards. "Don't do it," I shouted, my voice breaking. "You'll regret this." And then, headlights. Blinding beams swept across the water as a sheriff's cruiser skidded to a halt at the shoreline. Another followed right behind, sirens wailing into the night. "Freeze!" Sheriff Miller's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Drop the torch and back away from the dock." The torch wavered in the man's hand. Karen spun around, her face contorted in panic. "Don't stop! Do it now!" But the deputies were already charging down the gravel path, their flashlights cutting through the night. Guns weren't drawn, but their voices left no room for choice. "Drop it! Now!" The man hesitated, then tossed the torch into the lake with a hiss. Flames sputtered, steam rising into the night. Karen shrieked like a wounded animal. "Cowards, all of you, don't you see? He's stealing everything from us." Sheriff Miller's face was hard as stone. "Karen Douglas, you're under arrest for attempted arson, criminal trespass, and conspiracy to commit destruction of property." The words hit her like stones. Her knees buckled, her dog yelping in her arms. "No, you can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I am this community." But the deputies closed in, pulling her hands behind her back as she thrashed and screamed. "This isn't over. Do you hear me, Daniel? I'll never let you win." Her voice echoed across the lake as they dragged her up the hill, her rage swallowed by the night. The neighbors gathered in stunned silence, some clutching their robes, others holding lanterns. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Tom stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Daniel, are you all right?" I exhaled shakily, lowering the extinguisher. "I'm fine," but she almost wasn't. None of us were. A hush fell over the crowd. For the first time, the fear that Karen had ruled with was gone. In its place was something else. Shame, regret, but also relief. Sheriff Miller returned, his face tired but resolute. "It's over, Daniel. She won't be coming back from this." I nodded slowly, though part of me knew he was wrong. People like Karen never truly let go. But for now, the lake was quiet again. The days that followed were surreal. News of the arrest spread quickly, not just through our neighborhood, but into the county. Karen had gone from HOA president to county inmate overnight. Neighbors came by one after another, offering apologies, food, even help with the dock. Some admitted they had been too afraid to stand against her before. Others said they were ashamed they hadn't spoken sooner. I listened, accepted their words, but never let bitterness settle. Because in the end, I hadn't built that dock for them. I'd built it for me, for my grandfather, for peace, for the reminder that I could stand strong even when others tried to break me. One evening, a week after her arrest, I sat at the edge of the dock. The repairs were finished, the boards gleaming under the sunset. The lake stretched out before me, calm and endless. Tom joined me, carrying 2 fishing poles. He handed me one with a sheepish grin. "Thought you could use some company." I smiled. "Thanks, Tom." We sat there in silence, casting our lines, watching the ripples spread. For the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Peace. But even as I let that peace settle, I knew the story wasn't done. Because Karen's final words echoed in my mind, sharper than the crackle of fire. "This isn't over. I'll never let you win." The lake had finally gone quiet, or so it seemed. For a week after Karen's arrest, the neighborhood felt different, lighter. Neighbors waved at one another without fear. Kids played near the water without their parents being scolded. And for the first time since I'd moved in, people came together instead of hiding behind their blinds. But peace like that doesn't last when a storm still brews beneath the surface. It started with whispers. I was walking back from town one afternoon, a bag of supplies slung over my shoulder, when Tom caught up to me on the road. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. "Daniel," he said in a low voice, "have you heard? They say Karen's making phone calls from jail, to her cousin, to old board members. She's telling them she'll be back, and when she is, she's going to finish what she started." My chest tightened. I stopped walking. Finish what she started. What's that supposed to mean? Tom shook his head. "Nobody knows. But folks are scared again. Even with her locked up, she's still got her claws in people." I clenched my fists, staring at the lake shimmering in the distance. Peace had been within reach. But Karen wasn't the type to go down without one last strike. A few days later, the HOA board called for another meeting, the first since Karen's arrest. Normally I would have avoided it, tired of their theatrics, but something told me I needed to be there. When I walked into the hall, the air was heavy with tension. The crowd was larger than usual, neighbors whispering, eyes darting. The board members sat stiffly at the front, their papers stacked neatly, but their faces uneasy. The chairperson, a quiet woman named Linda, cleared her throat. "We've gathered today to discuss the future of this community. As you all know, Mrs. Karen Douglas has been arrested for attempted arson and other charges. Until further notice, she is suspended from her role as HOA president." Murmurs rippled through the room. Relief for some, disbelief for others. "But," Linda continued, her voice wavering, "Karen has written to the board from custody. She insists that she was wrongfully accused, and she still claims the shoreline is HOA property." I shot to my feet. "That's a lie, and you know it. The judge already dismissed her case." Linda raised her hands. "Daniel, please. I'm not defending her. I'm only telling you what she's been saying." From the corner, a neighbor spoke up. A man I didn't know well, Howard, leaned forward in his chair. "Maybe she's right. Maybe the deed isn't real. How do we know Daniel didn't trick us?" My stomach turned. Even after everything, Karen still had people doubting me. Tom stood, his voice steady. "We know because the sheriff himself confirmed it. Daniel owns the shoreline. End of story." But Howard shook his head. "Then why is Karen still fighting? People don't fight that hard unless they're right. A chorus of whispers rose. Doubt. Fear. Karen's poison spreading even from behind bars. That night I sat on my porch staring at the water. The moon reflected across the lake, calm and beautiful, but my chest burned with unease. Was it ever going to end? I heard footsteps on the gravel path and looked up. Sheriff Miller approached, his face shadowed under his hat. "Evening, Daniel," he said, pulling up a chair. "Evening, Sheriff. What brings you out here?" He sighed. "Word travels fast. I know Karen's still stirring things up from jail. But I came to warn you, she's got a bail hearing tomorrow." My heart dropped. "Bail? You mean she could be out?" He nodded grimly. "It's possible. And if she is, well, I don't think she's going to stay quiet." I leaned forward, my hands gripping the armrests. "Then what do I do? Keep rebuilding? Keep pretending everything's fine while she plots?" Miller studied me for a long moment. "You stand tall, because the truth's on your side. And when she comes back, and she will, you'll need to be ready." The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. My hands shook as I tried to work on the dock. Every creak of the boards made me flinch. Every whisper of the trees felt like a warning. By late afternoon, Tom came running down the road, his face flushed. "She's out," he shouted. "Karen made bail." My chest clenched like a vice. I dropped the hammer, my heart pounding in my ears. "Where is she now?" I asked. Tom swallowed hard. "Rumor is, she's coming here, tonight." The sun set slow, painting the sky blood red. The lake darkened, the air thick with tension. I sat on the porch with the baseball bat across my lap, the gasoline canister from before still sitting on the table. A reminder of how far she had already gone. Every sound made my muscles tense. Every shadow felt like it might move. And then, around midnight, I heard it. The crunch of gravel. Slow footsteps coming up the path. I gripped the bat tighter, my pulse racing. And then her voice. Smooth. Cold. "You thought you won, Daniel." Karen stepped into the glow of the porch light, her face pale but her eyes burning with fury. Her dog wasn't with her this time. She was alone, and somehow that made her more terrifying. "This lake," she hissed, "was never yours, and if I can't have it, neither will you." She pulled something from behind her back. A crowbar. The crowbar glinted in the porch light, its steel edge cold and merciless. Karen's knuckles were white as she gripped it, her chest rising and falling like a storm barely contained. Her voice was low, almost a growl. "You ruined everything, Daniel. My presidency, my authority, my respect. You think a piece of paper means you own this lake? No. You'll never belong here, I'll make sure of it." My grip tightened on the baseball bat across my lap. My pulse thudded in my ears, but I forced myself to breathe steady. "Karen," I said slowly, "put it down. This isn't the way." She laughed bitterly. "Isn't the way. The law didn't work. The board didn't work. The neighbors didn't listen. So now, it's just you and me." She stepped onto the porch, her boots creaking against the boards. Every step felt like thunder in my chest. "Stay back," I warned, rising to my feet. "I don't want this to end badly." Her eyes gleamed. "It already has." The night was silent except for the hum of crickets. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice in my head. "The lake reflects what you bring to it. Don't bring fear, Daniel. Bring strength." Karen raised the crowbar, her voice sharp. "If I can't control this place, no one will." She lunged. I swung the bat, catching the crowbar mid-arc. The clang of metal echoed into the night, sparks flying as wood met steel. My arms shook with the impact, but I held my ground. "Stop this," I shouted. But Karen only screamed, pulling back and swinging again. I blocked, my muscles straining, the vibration rattling my bones. The neighbors began to appear, porch lights flickering on up and down the road. Doors opened, voices gasped. Shadows moved toward the end of my driveway. The community was waking to the sound of our war. Then headlights cut through the dark. Sheriff Miller's cruiser barreled down the gravel road, dust flying. He skidded to a stop, jumped out and shouted, "Drop it, now!" But Karen didn't stop. She spun toward me again, her crowbar raised high, her face twisted with rage. "Karen, don't!" Miller roared, his hand hovering near his holster. "This is your last warning." Her scream ripped through the night as she swung one final time. I ducked, swung the bat low, and knocked the crowbar from her hands. It clattered against the porch boards, spinning into the gravel below. Karen stumbled forward, falling to her knees, her hands clawing at the ground. Sheriff Miller and the deputies were on her in seconds, pulling her arms behind her back as she shrieked, "No, you don't understand. He's the thief. He stole everything from me." Her voice cracked, her rage collapsing into sobs as the cuffs clicked shut. The neighbors stood in silence, watching as the woman who had ruled them with fear for years was dragged once more into the flashing red and blue lights. I dropped the bat, my body shaking, my breath ragged. Tom hurried up the path, his face pale. "Daniel, you all right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, just tired." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's over now." I looked out at the lake, its surface calm, reflecting the moon like nothing had happened. "I hope so," I murmured. Karen was taken away that night, charged with assault, trespassing, and violation of bail. This time there would be no quick release, no more chances. Her reign was over. In the days that followed, the neighborhood changed. People gathered together, not in fear, but in unity. They apologized for staying silent too long. They offered to help repair what Karen had tried to destroy. One evening, Linda, the quiet chairperson of the board, came to my cabin. She handed me a folded piece of paper. "The board voted," she said softly. "The HOA is stepping back from the shoreline. It's yours, Daniel. All of it. No more disputes." I unfolded the paper and saw the signatures. My chest swelled with relief. "Thank you," I said. "No," Linda shook her head, smiling faintly. "Thank you for standing when the rest of us were too afraid." Weeks later, I sat at the end of the dock, feet dangling over the water, fishing pole in hand. The boards were strong, reinforced, almost glowing under the evening sun. Tom sat beside me, his line cast into the water. Around us, kids splashed near the shore, neighbors laughed together, and for the first time, the lake felt alive again. I closed my eyes, listening to the water lap against the beams. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. "The lake reflects what you bring to it." Karen had brought fear, control, chaos, but I had brought patience, strength, and in the end, truth. The lake reflected it all, and I smiled because I knew, this time, peace would last.